All right. Well, now, Halitics, I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking to you today. It is a Thursday, and I'm kind of looking forward to today's program because some of the stories that I want to cover, and I will cover, are of great interest to me. And that's kind of why I do the program. A couple of reasons. Just talk a little bit about my motivations here. One is I just find these topics that I discuss interesting and important. And doing the podcast gives me an opportunity to kind of center them, focus on them, and prepare to discuss them and learn a little bit more about topics that I think are important and of interest. I hope that you will be too. The other, related reason is that I'm looking for a community, to build a community that is genuinely interested in these topics, views them as of great importance. And, we can talk very broadly, right? Israeli genocide, that's a really important topic, right? I mean, I think most people would agree, and find people who share my view that this is just simply wrong. It's a crime against humanity, and we as a nation should be doing everything possible to stop it rather than, as we've seen, bipartisan support for the genocide by the Jewish state. It's just something that's just wrong, and we should be against it. So that's a really important topic to me. Obviously, ecocide, whatever. Today, I'm going to look a little bit, not solely, but at something that maybe, in the grand scheme isn't as relevant, isn't as important. And that is, why in Texas does Jasmine Crockett have a very big lead, a double-digit lead in the latest poll came out by University of Texas, was published yesterday. She has a 12-point lead, and yet she is way behind. She is the odds-on long shot. she's a long shot. I don't really understand that. That's why I call today's program Market Inefficiency. Is there an inefficiency in the betting markets? Because there are two markets where, two websites, what have you, where you can bet on election results, and both of them, Kalshi and Polymarket, this morning when I checked, were 2/3 or more. The odds were actually greater than 2/3 that Talarico would win, and I don't really get that. We'll get to that story. Probably the most important maybe story we'll talk about is current affairs, or latest, the magazine, the online magazine that tends to, embrace a pretty progressive perspective. They talk about leftist candidates who can win. We'll talk about that article. It gets some things right, and I was really delayed to see Butch Ware getting some ink, or virtual ink, but they also get some things wrong, including, in my opinion, the way they shade Ware is very problematic, although consistent with the biases that I've seen from Nathan J. Robinson, the publisher of Current Affairs. Before we get to those stories, we're just going to, this just struck me. Sometimes I focus on stories that don't require that much time and energy to discuss. By the way, if you like what I'm doing here, please do click like, click subscribe, any interaction whatsoever. Share the video with friends, family, anyone you think would have interest or maybe would benefit from hearing the views expressed on Halitics. That obviously we would greatly, greatly appreciate. Also urge you, if you get the yen, give me a call, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. So that's kind of unique about Halitics. Not completely. There are programs. I've been centering Sam Cedar's show. He does the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland, I think, is pretty much always his co-host. She does some programs on her own, but he seems to always have her with him. Maybe not always. I've been centering him because I kind of actually like the way his podcast is kind of the direction it's taken. It's kind of moved further to the left than he ever was. So I appreciate that. If you like what we're doing, please do subscribe. Please let us know through your action. Let's add to that subscriber base. All right, let's start with the first story. So I got this email, actually, that's the body of the email, but let me share with you first what was actually in my inbox. Did I see it this morning? It's probably was yesterday. It's from Path to Progress. I never heard of them. I get a lot of emails. These are fundraising emails. I've never heard of Our Path to Progress.org. And it's called the Progressive Response to Trump's Speech. I'm sure they found something some website I gave my email address to, and, I said, you can share it. So I'm sure they reached out. That's why they reached out to me. I was intrigued. What is the group Our Path to Progress.org? As you know, I've worked with various progressive groups, including, as a staffer for Our Revolution, also worked with Progressive Maryland, was actually one of the early founders there at the early beginning, not at the very beginning maybe, but very early on at Progressive Maryland. Then maybe a couple decades later went back there, or 15 years later. I was interested in this group. So I clicked on my email, and of course, it's a fundraising email. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean I oppose them, or, you just are skeptical. Why are people, emailing me? It turns out they want money. Okay. Are they telling me the truth? Are they a group that I should consider? I mean, pretty much I'm not giving money to any institutions right now. I do give to candidates, public office, if I think they're truly progressive. One of my litmus tests is, are they opposed to Israel? Are they opposed to the genocide? Are they standing firm for life for the Palestinian people? And if they are, then I'm inclined to contribute to their campaign. In fact, I did contribute to a candidate earlier this week because of that very reason, because she expressed that position publicly. She embraced it publicly, that we must break with Israel. So, yes, I will give to candidates. I'm rarely going to contribute to institutions, although I won't say never. I opened up this email, and lo and behold, there's the NPR logo. And I honestly thought, I truly did. I thought, well, is this NPR? Is this a fundraising request from NPR? I get now when I listen to the, it's not even the radio. I listen to radio station QXR, WQXR, through a Android, through a tablet. And QXR is a New York City or New York-based station. I think their tower, they do still broadcast the old-fashioned way through the radio. But they also obviously are on the internet. And they do a lot of fundraisers. They always did, but they do a lot. I think they may have some NPR feed as well. And they talk about how it's, impossible to raise money. They're getting no government, or how they have to raise money because they get no help from the government. I assumed, Trump has cut off all that government support for public radio, for public television. And it's wrong. He shouldn't do that. They should be, I think, actually funded by the government. They shouldn't be getting underwriting from corporations. We know that because they do that, they embrace pro-war positions. They are unwilling to discuss the climate crisis to nearly the extent they should, although you never even see any discussion of the climate crisis on TV. At least you get a little bit of it on NPR, I believe. In any event, I saw this logo there, NPR Politics, and I thought, well, they're trying to raise money. And NPR is a very, well-known brand. It has a lot of goodwill associated with it. People trust NPR. And I thought this was, when I looked at it, incredibly misleading, because my first thought was, this is NPR. If I give money to this, it'll be going to NPR. Now, I wasn't going to do it, but I thought, well, they're raising money, NPR, and it's just wrong. It's just wrong. It's so misleading. So you got to look really closely when you get these fundraising emails, something that's called Our Pathway to Progress. They sound good, right? And then they put in NPR politics. Is that who this is about? I have no reason why they're even using that NPR logo. Is that a headline from NPR? I don't know. I clicked on the link. I clicked on the NPR logo. I didn't go anywhere with it. And then it turns out, they're just spreading, using fear of Trump to try to raise money. Very, very problematic. Progressives should not do this. Progressives groups should not do this. And I believe, moreover, that because they're doing this, they're not really progressive. Now, I get they have to raise money, I guess, to pay for their expenses, but tell us what you're doing with that money. And don't play this, bait and switch where you bait us with an NPR logo, but really it's a switch to paying, without really even being explicit, paying money to a totally unrelated group, our pathway to progress. So I actually, again, clicked on the website, went to the because this is more for research purposes. Oppose Trump and fight fascism. So again, give money to fight Trump. Obviously, people are excited to do that, but how are they fighting Trump? What exactly are they doing? I think you'd want to know that. If you're going to give money to a group that says they're fighting Trump, don't you want to know what they're actually doing, how they're taking on Trump? And they just don't tell you. I mean, the website was opaque. The language was, it was word salads. It was political. It was political speech. It wasn't specific. And I bring this up because I think we really, really have to be savvy. Dollar doesn't go nearly as far as it used to. Wages for many people are not keeping up with inflation. For some, they are. And it appears that right now real wages are on the rise. But still, for many, many Americans, presumably people who watch Halitics, who check Halitics out, it's not so easy. So if you're going to spend money because you think, well, this is a group that's going to fight to make my life a little better, which, by the way, is the reason I think you should give money to an institution, because you truly believe they're going to improve the material conditions under which you live or under which other people who maybe are not as fortunate live. Is that what this group, our Pathway to Progress, is doing? Well, they say our innovative policy solutions help candidates at all levels of government win their races. Okay, well, there's no link. I clicked, you can see our innovative policy solutions. Seems to me, if you're going to, center your innovative policy solutions, you'd have a link. This goes to a page where we list the solutions that we propose. What would those solutions be? Well, we primary corporate Democrats, or we identify. That'll be something. Here's one of our candidates that we helped elect. That would be an innovative. I don't know how innovative that is, but it would be a policy solution, right? We target corporate Dems. We target Republicans in purple districts, and we run populists against them, right? I mean, those are possible, but they don't provide any of those, okay? So I don't know what they are. They talk about their digital content, okay? Memes, right? Things you would see on social media, Facebook. Maybe they do podcasts. They're on TikTok, apparently. But there's no link. I have no idea what their digital content is. And I tried to find out a little bit. I didn't spend a ton of time, but it shouldn't be that hard. If they're raising money, they should be real clear. This is what we do with your money. And of course, it turns out they can't do any of this. What the hell they're doing, I have no idea. They say their digital content engages millions of young people with people-powered progressive politics. All right, what's the link to the site? To the videos, to the viral memes that you've shared. Give us that so we'll know that when we give you money, it will make a difference. They don't give you any of that, but they do tell you that it requires a lot of money. Well, forgive me for not biting. Forgive me for not contributing, because you haven't given anything tangible to me. You haven't presented any specific ways in which you are addressing the material conditions under which people live. Now, they do provide a priorities link at their website. And I went to that. I was like, well, what are they? Are they specific? And it's long. There's a whole laundry list of different, I guess what they would consider to be the kind of appealing policies and I'm not going to go through all that. It's not worth it on my time, but your time. Ourpathwaytoprogress.org. You can check it out. I mean, I'm just telling you my reaction to this and what I'm trying to impart and what I think is the message. Don't contribute to groups if they're not specific. They don't tell you what they're doing with your money. They don't give you links to what their work is. So here's what I found incredibly frustrating. If I'm going to give money to any progressive group, I want to know they're fighting tooth and nail for Medicare for all. If they're addressed, now maybe that's not their issue, right? Maybe it's an environmental group and their focus is to stop data centers, right? Well, that is something I would definitely consider contributing to. I don't care about they don't have a priority tab that addresses healthcare. Fine, that's not what I'd give them money for. I'd give them money because they're fighting to keep data centers out of residential communities because they're bad for people's health and they're destructive in all manner of ways. So of course. But if you're a general group, you call yourself Our Pathway to Progress, you talk about healthcare, then I want to see you say, we support a single payer comprehensive system in which there is no charge to access healthcare for anybody. And, it's guaranteed. That would be what I want to see. That's not what they tell you. They give you this, again, the word's out, a healthcare system that allows all Americans to access medical care, regardless of employment, wealth, or immigration status. Well, frankly, we kind of already have that. If you show up at an emergency room, you get care, regardless of, now you may only get it if it's an emergent situation. But that's not radical. Accessing medical care where they pull you got shot, they take the bullet out of your wound, they stitch you up, regardless of your employment, wealth, or immigration status. Well, we have that. So that tells me nothing about what their priorities are. These are, when you get fundraising appeals, what I ask people to do, hey, be real, do your homework. Be skeptical. Be cynical. Do you know people who work for them? Now, I looked at that too. There's no list. There's not one person identified in that About tab, ourpathwaytoprogress.org. I don't know who their employees are. I don't know who their executives are or their board. Are they people who are well known? Are they people who are reputable? That might help me decide if I was so inclined to give. Now, I want to compare that to Our Revolution where I worked, and I'm not urging you to give to Our Revolution, but I would note you go to the website and they tell you who the people are. They give you pictures of their actions, what they've done. They have various websites, YouTube pages, Facebook pages where you can see exactly the kind of digital content that Our Revolution generates, including long-form meetings on Zoom, where there are politicos, where they're leading, leading the charge for progressive candidates. So that all, to my way of thinking, would justify contribution. But I don't see any of that in Our Pathway to Progress.org. I just would hope people don't fall for that. Doesn't make sense to me. All right, 240-242-5646. I'd love to talk to you if you have any thoughts on this. I know it's not the usual political, but it's, I think pretty important stuff. 240-242-5646. Would love to talk to you. Okay, the thumbnail for today's Halitics goes to that Texas Senate race. The first primary, I guess it's not the first primary. No, because we had the New Jersey primary where Ana Lilia Mejia won, defeating the candidate that AIPAC had targeted, but the victor, Mejia, was not their preferred candidate, Tahisha Way. I've already analyzed that race to some significant amount and concluded that despite the fact that AIPAC's preferred candidate, the pro-Israel candidate, did not win, AIPAC did not lose by any means. The candidate they targeted did lose, and they sent a powerful message to centrists and even so-called liberals. You buck us at your peril. The race in Texas is between two candidates who both have expressed support to some degree for Israel. Not, they've criticized Israel, but they've also offered support for Israel, both saying that they would provide defensive but not offensive weapons to Israel. I have issues with both of them. What I want to examine right now is what I consider to be a very strange set of odds. You can see this was earlier this morning, these two screenshots, Polymarket at the top, Kalshi at the bottom. And you can see Kalshi's in March. They say that the race begins on Tuesday, March 3rd. So it's coming right up. We'll know the results presumably Tuesday night. I don't think it'll be that late at night, especially when you look at either the odds or the polls. Both suggest this race is not particularly close. It's tightened a little bit. I think the last numbers I saw, I didn't do a screenshot for, had Talarico. Well, I think Talarico was still at 72% when I last looked on Polymarket, but he was down to 69, 68%, still more than 2/3 likelihood of prevailing on Kalshi. And this is down. He was up 80% on Kalshi and close to that, I believe, on Polymarket, maybe over 8% just a few days ago. What caused that drop was a very, very favorable poll for Crockett. But what I don't understand is how the polling for Crockett doesn't change the favorite. Talarico still remains a pretty heavy favorite. You got to put $7 down to get $10 back. Basically, you win $3 if you bet $7 on Talarico. You only have to bet $3 to get $10 back if you bet on Crockett. So I don't get that. I don't understand that. If it was just one poll, I might say, okay, well, maybe there are other factors involved. But whatever explanations you provide seem to me insufficient. So I think there's got to be a market inefficiency here, unless these polls, and I haven't seen any discussion of how these polls are wrong. One person said, well, the University of Texas polls only 350 people polled. I don't know if that's true. I didn't look into it that closely, but I didn't feel like I needed to, because the University of Houston poll also has Crockett up by a very significant margin. There's the argument, well, there are more undecideds for Talarico. How do you know that? Why is that? Why would people think that? Is there some poll that's, because I haven't seen that. It seems to me that people are looking at these polls and trying to come up with reasons not to believe them. People who do these polls, I mean, they have experience. They know what they're doing. As far as I know, neither one of these was the poll's commissioned by a candidate. I don't believe it. I throw it out. It's got no value. But that's not what happened here. The University of Texas and the University of Houston are both independent of the campaigns. So I think the only thing you can conclude is that the odds makers are seeing something that just isn't in those polls. And I, for the life of me, can't figure out what it is. One commentator noted with respect to the Kalshi poll that turnout, I don't know if this is true either. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Turnout in black neighborhoods has been heavy. Now, we do know that Crockett has over 80% support from black communities, according to the polls. Obviously, we don't know if that's going to happen in the election, but the polls tend to be pretty reliable in that regard. And Talarico has less support still a majority of support from white and Latino voters. I don't know how he's going to overcome this. I just don't get it. I don't think it's racism. I really don't. I mean, gamblers, once you put your money down, you put your money down because you want to win, right? I mean, it kind of, all the biases, they don't go out the window, but you're not consciously biased anyway. But there may be the idea that Texas is a white state. It's really not. It's very cosmopolitan. There are a lot of Latino voters. There's the idea, well, Mamdani won New York City's Democratic primary by a much bigger margin than he was projected to. If he was even projected to at all, he has some of the same coalition as Talarico. I don't see it. I could be totally wrong. I'm certainly not going to put any money down. I mean, I wouldn't bet for the life of me on these races, and I don't urge anyone to do it. But I do find it quite intriguing that there's such a difference between what the polls are telling us, which is that Crockett should win relatively easily. It will be an early night, and what the odds makers are telling us, which is that Talarico should win. I find that very odd. I mean, I'd love to know if other folks are equally intrigued, or they just say, oh, well, the gamblers. Usually, if you're going to have to choose one or the other, you should probably go with the bettors. But this isn't one of those cases. All right, 240-242-5646. Is there a systematic mistake there? Is there a systematic undercount of a particular demographic? That's sort of what you saw with Mamdani, which was first-time voters. He really motivated them to the polls. Younger voters voted in much higher numbers than had previously been expected, including many voters of color, even though I believe in the primary, Cuomo did win the black vote. Younger black voters definitely gravitated towards Mamdani, and he did better in that demographic than the polling reflected because they undercounted the number of young voters of color. I don't know why we would expect that to happen in this case. Talarico and Crockett are both relatively young candidates. Neither one has the kind of baggage that obviously Andrew Cuomo had in New York City when he was running last year. So who knows? I mean, we'll find out. I mean, Wednesday may very likely come in with egg on my face and say, yeah, the odds makers know what they're doing. The bettors know what they're doing. I think those odds are basically just set by, the line, right? It's just who bets and how much and on who. If there a whole lot of money comes in for Crockett, then the odds drop for Talarico, right? Did I say that right? Odds, right? His odds of winning drop if a whole lot of money comes in for Crockett, and that did happen. That happened after the last poll dropped, the Texas poll, but not that much, right? I mean, it settled in around 70%. All right, 240-242-5646. I found this headline very, what's the word I'm looking for? Pleasing. I was very happy when I saw this. I was glad Current Affairs chose to address this issue. And we'll get into the specifics of that article that I think came out just a couple days ago, the 20th, 21st, maybe it was the 21st of this month. Leftists can stack up wins in the 2026 midterms. Well, I wanted, though, talk, and now's the time to bring into the discussion another race, another primary where you have polling that suggests, like in Texas, that one candidate is poised to win relatively big, and that is Maine. So you have a establishment. It's a little bit of a different dynamic. You have an older a more establishment type candidate. You really don't have that in Texas. I don't think either Talarico. Yes, Talarico's a little bit more of an establishment figure than Crockett, but I don't think you'd consider him a real Texas establishment guy. And he's relatively young. Maybe he's 40s, maybe Crockett's in her 30s. I don't really know exactly how old either one is, but they're not. You wouldn't call them older candidates for sure. You'd never say that about either one. You would say that about Janet Mills, and you would say that about Susan Collins. You can see in the race for the Senate in Maine, if it shapes up to be Susan Collins versus the younger Democrat running Graham Plattner, Plattner should win. The latest poll came out just a couple weeks, less than 2 weeks ago, University of New Hampshire, Plattner up by 11. Pan Atlantic poll, which was a very unfavorable poll for Plattner, still had him winning by 1. And MPRC earlier, before he was so well known, had him up by 4. It's hard to look at those numbers and conclude that Graham Plattner isn't a clear favorite to win the Senate race in Maine if he is the Democratic nominee. And you can also see he's getting really close to that 50%, 49% for Plattner. Looks like it's a real uphill climb for Susan Collins in Maine. So that's one of those leftists, right? Plattner's the leftist in that race, I would argue, certainly versus Janet Mills, the incumbent governor. This is where a leftist has a real good chance, probably will win, actually. I would say the odds are very good he'll win. And he's not just winning against Collins. He's winning against Collins, and he does better against Collins, by the way. Much better against Collins than Mills. In that UNH poll, he's up by 11 over Collins. In that UNH poll that just came out when it's Mills versus Collins, she's up by 1 point. She's tied in the Pan Atlantic poll, which had Plattner up by a point. And she's up in the MPRC poll, as was. Collins is up. Collins is up in the MPRC poll, whereas Plattner was ahead in all the polls. So Plattner's clearly the stronger candidate against Collins. There's no question about it. And Maine voters get it. Maine voters understand Plattner's the better candidate. Maine voters now are getting not only that he's the better candidate, but that the Democratic elites, the Democratic establishment, would prefer to lose. They would rather lose to Susan Collins than win with Graham Plattner, because Graham Plattner poses a real threat, potentially, truly an existential threat to the corporate elite Dems. He's exactly who they don't want. That's why Chuck Schumer went to Janet Mills and got down on his hands and knees and begged her to run against Plattner. But fortunately, it looks like the people of Maine have clearly come to their senses. Plattner's up by 38 points in the University of New Hampshire poll. By the way, thank you, D. Morgan. The establishment wants Talarico. The people want Jasmine. Well, I can't argue with that. I don't know if the establishment wants Talarico, but they may. I mean, I'm not saying they don't, but I think it seems clear from the polling that the majority, obviously the majority of Texas Democrats want Crockett. At least that's what that poll suggests, unless that poll's wrong. There's something wrong with that snapshot. By the way, D. Morgan, if you want to chime in, I'd love to know why you think the establishment is backing Talarico. Do you think it's a racism issue? Do you think it's who can win issue? The establishment believes Talarico has a better shot at beating, I guess, the Republican. Probably it's going to be Ken Paxton, who's really a kook, a nut job. And is that a legitimate position for them to take? I don't like either candidate. I probably will confess I would probably vote. I said this to the left-handed leftist Monday. I would probably vote for Talarico. I have some issues with both of their positions on Israel, but I find Crockett's more problematic because she has refused to co-sponsor the Block the Bombs Act. To me, that's a big issue. It's not the only issue, but it's an issue. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. Plattner way ahead in the polls. And by the way, the betting markets get it. They get Maine. They do. They don't reject that poll. Now, it's a bigger lead. I mean, 38%, it's pretty hard to ignore. But they have Plattner now up by 78% to 22%. So Plattner with a huge advantage in the betting market in this race. And understandably so. In fact, you could argue, well, I could argue it should even be higher. If he's up by 38 points, aren't the odds closer to 85% that he'll beat Mills? I'm not sure when that race is. Maybe it's still some ways off. 240-242-5646. Let me look it up. I want to find out right now. Maine Senate primary. Let's find out when that is. Date. 2026. We have, why don't they just tell you? I cannot stand when they don't. June 9th. So there's a little bit of time. Maybe that's the theory. There's a little bit of time before it happens. Yeah, there's another poll there has Plattner up by 15, which isn't even reflected in the slide I gave you. All right, 240-242-5646. I want to get to that article because current affairs, because I think, well, there's something I like about it, and I'll tell you what I like about it. I'm going to show you what I like about it. And I put an oval yellow around what I like about it, and that's Butch Ware. So I've been talking about Green Party candidates, and I want Green Party candidates to do well. I want Green Party candidates to win. I think it's incredibly important that we defeat the Democratic elites. It doesn't mean you have to vote for a Green to do that. For example, in Maine, voting for Graham Plattner over Janet Mills in the primary is taking a position against the establishment. But voting for a Green, man, that's really taking a position against the establishment. And I think it's very, very cool that current affairs put Butch Ware in that, that little, what's he called it? Chart, 2x4, right? So 2 rows, 4 columns. And I can recognize some of the people in there. Janice Lewis George, top. One from the left, right? Second from the left is Janice, as you're looking at, is Janice Lewis George. She's a DC councilwoman. Kat Abu Ghazaleh, I believe. Kat Abu Ghazaleh, next to George in the middle. She's running in Illinois in a primary. Cori Bush, obviously. Center, left, bottom. And then to her left, as she's looking at you, is Butch Ware. And I think that's Charles Booker. I'm not absolutely certain, but may be wrong about that. Who's running for Senate in Kentucky to Ware's left. So if I'm wrong about that, I apologize. Some of the other folks I don't recognize. Butch Ware to me is just clearly the best choice in California, partly because he's not a Democrat, but mostly because he's pro-Medicare for all and he's against supporting the genocide by Israel. And there's no other candidate running who takes that position, as far as I can tell. And I've looked very closely at that, or pretty darn closely, right? You have people like Xavier Becerra. You have Antonio Villaraigosa. You have Katie Porter. None of them have been outspoken in their condemnation of the pro-Israel policies of the U.S. government. And none of them is a pro-Medicare for all candidate. Well, those are such important issues. You have a choice here. You can vote for Butch Ware. You're not helping any Republican. Vote for him. Now, I would say vote for Cori Bush, too. Incredibly important. She's running against Wes Bell, the $8 million or $11 million AIPAC man in St. Louis for Congress. She was defeated in the last cycle. I don't know what the polling looks like. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't. Wes Bell has had some issues. He had some thugs break up a town hall that he held because a lot of people were very critical of his pro-Israel position. He had thugs break it up. I don't think that made him too popular. I don't think Cori Bush is going to win that. Could be totally wrong. Haven't looked at the numbers. Maybe I hope I'm wrong. I like her a lot. I don't think she's going to win. I hope Butch Ware has a shot. I don't like the way, I feel like the current affairs article, yes, they centered him. They didn't do a very good job with it in certain ways. Let's go through this. We're not only going to focus on Butch Ware, but on how I think current affairs, despite positioning itself to the left, besides positioning itself, or despite positioning itself as anti-corporate Dem, is still, in many ways, acting as a backstop for the Dems. And I don't like it. I just don't like it. So here's what current affairs says. The good news is that political pushback has already begun, not just against Trump, but against the standard issue corporate friendly Dems who enable him. And they point out, yes, this panel that the New York Times spoke to, 13 Democrat voters, every single one said they wanted a progressive rather than a centrist. That's big. New York Times doesn't know what to do with that because they only support centrists at this point, or people who claim to be progressives. I guess, did they endorse, was in the last, in 2020, they endorsed Amy Klobuchar for Democrat nomination for president. And I think it was Elizabeth, maybe Warren, or was it someone else? So I guess you could say, well, she's sort of progressive, right? Klobuchar, obviously not. So they're trying to split the baby. When it came to the mayor's race, they told you to vote for Andrew Cuomo. So that tells you who they are. That tells you who they are. Current affairs saying the good news is that Democratic voters are turning against the Democratic centrists, the Schumers and the Hakeem Jeffries. And that is good news. That's good news, not just, my view is we need to beat both the Democratic centrists and obviously the Republicans are both huge danger to our freedoms, that they made things worse and worse for people. Freedoms, prosperity, life on the earth, right? Though both parties are bad for that. But even if you're one of those people who just think, well, what we have to do is defeat Trump, that's the job one, right? We've got to defeat Trump first, kind of like Germany first in World War II. Then we'll deal with Stalin next, right? So this is Trump first strategy. That even if that's what you embrace, you should still welcome the fact that Democratic voters are moving left in primaries, are demanding, at least according to current affairs and according to the New York Times, are demanding more progressive candidates carry the Democratic standard, be the bearers, the standard bearers. And why? Well, I told you I was going to give you a little more Sam Cedar, Emma Vigeland. It's actually not more. It's part of what I played yesterday, a little snippet. But here's why you should be glad, if it's true, that Democratic voters are demanding more progressive candidates to run against Republicans.
We want to preserve the system. And you know what the voters said about the system?
System screwed us over.
They said we would prefer fascism to the system. That is how badly our so-called democracy in this country is broken.
All right. So she's very, very clear there. And she's right. Emma Vigeland is right. When Democrats choose more of the same, centrism, establishmentarianism, when they do that, voters say we'd rather have fascists. Hey, we'd rather have someone who's going to give us clearly defined enemies like immigrants, now Iran. We'd rather have them than the mealy-mouthed corporate suckers on the Democratic side. It doesn't matter how bad Trump, you can make your case. Yeah, Trump is worse. Trump this, that. Democrats are feckless. They stand for nothing. They're going to establish in the back. We'd rather have a fascist. And that is not wrong. I mean, it's too bad. It's unfortunate. It's a bad thing, but it's not incorrect what she says. You have to fight for the American people if you want to win. It's not enough to be less awful than Trump. 240-242-5646 from Kevin in the chat. I really like Jasmine Crockett, but I think Talarico has a much better chance of defeating Paxton. I agree with that, Corvin, although I don't really like either of them. But I think, now I don't know, Carlos, the left-handed leftist, says no shot either one. Maybe that's true. I think it would be very tough for Jasmine Crockett to win the Texas general. More from current affairs. Let's get right into it. And this article, leftists have a real shot. I hate to go after them, but I think it's important because current affairs has made it clear. Nathan J. Robinson told Brianna Joy Gray that what matters most was defeating Trump. That you don't do this. You do the lesser of two evils, he said. You don't have litmus tests. He said he agreed with now really disgraced Noam Chomsky, a friend of Jeffrey Epstein, Noam Chomsky. Robin said, I agree with him. You don't do this lesser of two evils. You don't have litmus tests. Okay, one candidate is for genocide. Well, if the other candidate's even worse, you support the genocide candidate. That was Nathan J. Robinson. Nathan J. Robinson has been critical of third parties. He did not like Jill Stein's run. He felt that she took votes away from his the candidate he wanted, thought had a shot at winning. I'm not saying he would have preferred Jill Stein, but he thought that Kamala Harris had a shot at winning, and he wanted her to beat Trump. He wanted to stop Trump at all costs, so he was critical of Stein's run in 24. He was critical of Stein's run in 2016, notwithstanding just how bad the Democratic nominees were. That's who current affairs is. Ultimately, current affairs will return to the Democratic fold. They are going to go back to the sheep. They're a sheep that's going to go back to the wolves in that party. And you see it in this article. And it's and that's why, I say I highlight it, because while there's some value in it, you can't take it too seriously. They get things wrong. So here's what the writer says. It wasn't Robinson, but obviously he's the editor-in-chief, so he determines what gets published. Finally, leftists are beginning to take aim at state-level exec offices, too. In California, where Governor Gavin Newsom, I guess that's funny. Newsom's reign will soon be drawing to a close. By the way, I just feel like that is kind of lame. You don't like Gavin Newsom, fine, and he does link to some of the bad things Newsom's done, but I don't like Newsom either. But yeah, I don't know. It seems a little bit childish. It'll soon be drawing to a close, and a few different candidates are hoping to take the state in a more firmly progressive, less Silicon Valley direction. So they bring up Katie Porter, and they get it. He gets it wrong immediately. Katie Porter, who backs both the Green New Deal and Medicare for All. A stark contrast to Newsom, who once promised to implement universal health care. And then I was very pleased to see that the second candidate they list, and they're calling Katie Porter a leftist. I would not call her a leftist. She's presumably a leftist because she backs both the Green New Deal and Medicare for All. Does she? Then the next name is Butch Ware. I was really happy to see this. This was something we talked about with Arlen. Green candidates are not getting media attention. Well, I'm really glad Current Affairs gave Butch Ware some virtual ink. And they note that he cites Malcolm X and Kwame Ture, who I'm not familiar with. I should be, but I'm not, as political heroes. Well, I support Butch Ware not because he cites Malcolm X as a political hero, although that's good. I like Malcolm X too. I think Malcolm X really was a really important and good person in terms of trying to bring people together to improve life for poor, struggling, working people. He was. That was really what he was about. So yes, I get it. I like that about Butch Ware. But I support Butch Ware because he's for Medicare for All and ending our support for Israel. And also they note here he has an ambitious plan for state-owned social housing modeled after Vienna. I like that too. I really like that too. So I'm glad Current Affairs centers that. But does Katie Porter back both the Green New Deal and Medicare for All as they claim? Well, there's a link. So because I read that, I'm like, I don't know that she supports either one in particular. But let's go to the link. Because, I could be wrong. I'm wrong all the time. Well, that's an old link. I want you to look at the date. This is from an article in The Nation. Representative Katie Porter, it's kind of like a softball piece they did on Katie Porter. Putting working people first. Look at that date. August 12th, 2020. We're talking over 5 years ago. That's your site. That's what you're saying. She's the tense in the current affairs article about Katie Porter is she supports the Green New Deal and Medicare for All. That's what the current affairs says in the current tense. I'll put that back up for you. There it is. It's in green. Katie Porter, who backs both Green New Deal and Medicare for All. Their evidence, an article from 2020. I decided to update that a little bit. The reason I tell you this is so you don't support Katie Porter. She doesn't deserve your support. Butch Ware does. This is from Katie Porter's website in this cycle. In fact, you can see it's in this cycle because it says Katie Porter for governor. It doesn't say Katie Porter for representative, which is when that Nation article was published. Right now, defending your health care from Trump's attacks. So right there, she already lost me. Defending, no, the health care that Californians get is woefully inadequate. The health care they were getting under Joe Biden was woefully inadequate. It wasn't Medicare for All. It was very expensive. There are bankruptcies in California because poor, struggling working people can't afford life-saving treatment. There are death panels in California because insurance companies make decisions that they're not going to pay for life-saving treatment. So Katie Porter gets it wrong where she says defending your healthcare. She should say building a much better healthcare system for everyone. So she's wrong there. She's not for Medicare for All, but she's even more explicitly not for Medicare for All. So I bring this up again because current affairs is lying. Lying. They tell you she's for Medicare for All, but she's not. And it frustrates me. So what does she say she's going to do? She's going to fight cuts. She's not going to fight for Medicare for All. She says she wants to protect, expand, and improve health care for all our residents. She doesn't say we're going to guarantee health care for all at no charge. She says up above, Trump and his cronies are attacking the very foundations for our healthcare system with drastic and devastating cuts. Yes, it's really bad. But she's not saying the right answer is Medicare for All. So current affairs promoting Katie Porter for governor when she's the wrong candidate. She's the wrong candidate. Why do they do that? Because they don't they do not want third-party candidates to win. They don't want alternative candidates to run. They want to keep us in that Democratic Republican fold. All right. From CPND, the green guy sounds good. Yes, he does. Also, what do you think from Donald DeLeon? What do you think about the Democratic nominees for governor in Texas? Well, we talked about that earlier. We talked about Crockett and Talarico, and I don't really like either one particularly. I agree with Kevin that I think Talarico has a better chance of defeating Paxton. And I'll tell you, my biggest issue, really, the thing I really find troubling about Jasmine Crockett is that she is not a co-sponsor of the Block the Bombs Act. She says she doesn't want to support, she does not support offensive weapons for Israel, which is exactly what, by the way, Talarico says. And she does support defensive weapons for Israel, which is exactly what Talarico says. I disagree with both of them. We shouldn't give either to Israel. Israel should get no weapons from us. Zero, no weapon systems, no support, nothing. So I disagree with both of them. But what I find frustrating about Crockett in particular is that she claims that she doesn't want Trump to have the power unilaterally to arm Israel. And she does believe that we should not be providing offensive weapons to Israel. And that's what the Block the Bombs Act does. She doesn't co-sponsor it. Talarico, not in Congress, couldn't be a co-sponsor. Do I trust him to co-sponsor? Not particularly, but he hasn't backed away from it. I also do think Talarico probably would be a better, would have a better chance. So there you go. Katie's a turn off for me. And Donald agrees with what I said, agrees with my analysis. By the way, call in if you want to talk. 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. Yeah, I see some new folks in there in the chat. I love seeing you guys there, gals, people, them, you, she, he, whatever. I want to talk to you. 240-242-5646. That's what we do here at Halitics. That's a little bit different. One thing, now I'm saying again, current affairs, they're a Democratic organ, maybe not establishment, but a Democratic organ. I showed you why I like this article. I'm going to show it to you one more time. The cover with the 8 candidates. And the one candidate they don't center, the one leftist who is almost, I won't say almost certain, but is very likely to win. And he is a leftist. He's a leftist because he's for Medicare for all. He's a leftist because he's against supporting Israel. Is Graham Plattner in Maine. And why isn't he supported? Well, they do play that centrist game. They do play to a degree, and I don't like it, the ID politics game. And I'll give you the exact quote here that really, I think, is just absurd from current affairs when it comes to our friend Graham Plattner. So here you go. Somehow, Graham Plattner has somehow weathered the controversy over his Nazi tattoo, which you really might have expected to finish him. No, I didn't. Why would I expect that to finish him? I'm Jewish. I don't give a crap about that tattoo. Yes, it was apparently some sort of death's head Totenkopf thing. I saw it. I thought maybe, yeah. I was a little suspicious when I saw it, but I was like, I'm 62 years old. I went to religious school. I was raised with the kind of a backdrop of the Nazis. Graham Plattner's 25 years younger than I am. He was in the military. He was a young kid. He saw what looked to him like a cool tattoo. There's no swastika in it. There's no SS letters in it. I don't condemn him for that. And not only do I not condemn him, I wouldn't have expected to finish him at all. I think this is the kind of absurd controversy that some progressives want to use to center identity politics rather than policy. What matters is policy. Are his policies good for people or aren't they? His are good. Vote for Graham Plattner. But they won't, highlight him because, I guess, of this absurd Nazi tattoo. Here's somewhere else you can kind of see where current affairs gets it wrong. Same page, where they're talking about Chris Beardsley, a Peace Corps veteran who backs Medicare for all. I assume he does, but I don't trust right now current affairs when they tell me anybody backs Medicare for all, because they told me Katie Porter does and she doesn't. He condemns the genocide in Gaza, and they talk about his challenge to Chris Coons. They say, you might remember Coons as the legislator who was repeatedly yelled at on a train by Gray Zone reporter Aaron Mate. They don't like Aaron Mate. Why don't they like Aaron Mate? Because he goes after Democrats. Because current affairs ultimately sees itself as a cape for the Democratic Party. Aaron Mate has consistently condemned the Democratic Party for its pro-war positions, for its hypocrisies, for its violence against the American people, against the world. Violent policies. Pro-cop policies. Pro-genocide policies. Aaron Mate never yelled at Chris Coons. The video is very easy to find. It's right there. I'm going to play part of it. They say they want to somehow throw shade. Why would you throw shade at Aaron Mate there? What you should do is say, Chris Coons, whom Aaron Monte exposed as a pro-genocide Congress member, senator, right? I think Coons is a senator. So that is how you do it. You don't throw shade on him by lying and saying Aaron Monte, who is a great journalist, was yelling. You can barely hear Aaron Monte here.
Senator, I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh my God, did you hear that yelling? Did you hear him yell there? They're on a train. You can hear the train noise. Let me exit that out. So here you go. Here's Aaron Monte yelling, according to Current Affairs.
Senator, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but why not call for a ceasefire in Gaza? I'm a journalist.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but why not call for a ceasefire in Gaza? Listen to him yell.
For a ceasefire in Gaza. You have 4,600 children killed. 46. I know it's a quiet card. I apologize for abuse, but I understand. But children are dying. Children are dying, sir. More than 40. Why not call for a ceasefire? They're being killed with our weapons.
He's just so upset. Coons doesn't want to hear it. He's a Democrat. And Aaron Monte's calling him out. Current Affairs has a problem with that. All right, 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. Kevin saying, I love getting the comments, guys. I'm really responding to you and say guys, because these are guys, at least Kevin, Donald, guys' names. Also, those polls were in college towns, right? Houston and UT, which is in Austin. Very liberal. The vast majority of Dems in more rural areas prefer Talarico. Yeah, maybe I'm wrong about this. And maybe I should look at those crosstabs. I would assume the people who did those polls, really went to find a representative sampling of Texans. So they tried to get the right percentage of rural Texas Democrats and urban Texas Democrats and suburban Texas Democrats. We'll see. Again, the bettors are usually, if you're going to put your money down, you do your homework. My guess is that they did, but I still would be surprised if Crockett loses that race. All right, I'm going to go final topic. Now I lose viewers, I lose people. They don't, I've got this reputation for being, I guess, transphobic, which I don't think is fair, but I don't always endorse what I consider to be the most kind of extreme positions that some, not all, some trans activists take. And basically, it just goes to the issue of trans girls competing in high level, what I consider high level varsity high school sports and above. I have an issue with that. So if you don't like that, I'm transphobic. Green Party VP, this is according to, and let me just actually show you the quote first. So this is what, again, why I have a huge problem with Current Affairs, because I support Butch Ware. And I'm really glad that they centered him. And I'm really glad that he's getting the attention he gets in Current Affairs. I think they throw unfair shade at him. Right here. So all these politicians have flaws, some of them serious. Katie Porter has earned a reputation as a mean boss. Yes. Nithya Raman has been censured by the LA DSA for pursuing the endorsement of Dems for Israel. That's really bad. That's really bad. And then they note Butch Ware has said some transphobic BS. Now, what did he say? Now, again, this is another example of Current Affairs really misrepresenting the facts. They claim, he said, so the link is to him saying they claim it's anti-trans. What he actually said, according to this article in Them, is that he doesn't think male athletes or bio males should be playing in female sports. I agree with that. I think that sports should be sex segregated, not gender segregated, sex segregated. Now, I understand that may mean or does mean that some trans girls and women will not have the opportunity to play, because especially if they've undergone any kind of treatment that changes them biologically, hormonally. They won't be as strong. They won't have the musculature of a male who hasn't undergone transition. And I understand that. And I have a couple of responses to that. One is, well, if you want to play high-level sports, then don't transition. I mean, you're a woman, you're a woman. Dress how you want to dress. Identify however you want to identify. Use whatever pronouns. All cool, all good. But when it comes to sports, compete based on your biology. And if you decide you want to compete, you want to transition physically, physiologically, all right, then you do, but then you're giving something up, and that is the opportunity to compete in sports as a female, as a girl, as a woman. That said, there should be plenty of opportunities for all of us to compete. I'm big on co-ed sports. I'm big on inclusivity. But when it comes to high level, competitive high school and college sports and above pro, I would say that's where I draw the line. I don't think when we're said, I don't think that bio male should play in female sports. I don't have a problem with that. But I also would note, so here's what Die Meow says. The women in sports overall, thank you for the comments, by the way, everybody. And I just want to have a good, respectful dialogue. You disagree with me, call in. Tell me why I'm wrong. I'll listen. I can evolve on any issue. My wife played high school and college volleyball. This may be my bias, just telling you. My wife, much better athlete than I ever was. She played varsity. She was an all-county volleyball player, and she played varsity in college as a freshman. She was a starting volleyball player in college as a freshman. That's pretty damn good. That's how good an athlete she was. She's really little. I mean, she's not short, but she's slender. She is a petite build. Not quite, but close. She's slender. She would not physically be able to match in terms of the speed or the velocity of a male, a biological male. She would be at a disadvantage. And I see that. And maybe that biases me. I'll admit it. But I think there should be a female-only space for sports. That's where I come down. And CPND also disagrees with that. All right. I'm not going to argue too much. But I also would say that I have a problem with Butch Ware being targeted by the current affairs, calling it anti-trans BS. And they use the BS. He said, I don't think that biological male should play in female sports. His position, I don't know whether he said that. I'm assuming he did. His current position, by the way, is not that. His position in the race, and again, they get things wrong. They're very dated. His position on this issue, and I wouldn't even talk about it if current affairs hadn't brought it up. California 2026 governor candidates discuss transgender athletes in school sports. So this is CBS, and I give CBS News credit. By the way, this is, I believe, before the takeover by Ellison, so we can't say that they're all right-wing at this point. I give them credit because they talk to Butch Ware about it. They talk directly to Butch Ware, and they get his position. And his position, lo and behold, is identical to Katie Porter's. So current affairs attacks him, criticizes him for supposedly being a transphobe. They don't say boo about Katie Porter's position. And it's the same. According to Ware, he says, I'm staying out of it. Let the public school officials, let the governing bodies that run these sports affairs and events make the decision what they think is appropriate. Why would I make it? That's not my area of expertise. And Katie Porter takes the exact same view. So for current affairs to attack Butch Ware on this issue is just simply wrong. And it's yet another example of current affairs marginalizing, and I get they did report on him, but they're still ultimately marginalizing the Green Party candidate. I have a big problem with that. And I also think in terms of winning elections, I mean, you got to recognize, to some degree where the public is. And even in liberal California, over 70% of public school parents agree with the position that allegedly Butch Ware held that allegedly is transphobic. 71% say they support Trump on this issue. This is a winning issue for Republicans. You want to defeat Trump. If that's the most important thing to you, then maybe you have to be willing to, on that issue, compromise. Now, if you say, well, but hell, this is too important. This is human rights. This is civil rights. I get that. I agree. There's some issues you don't compromise on. And I would say the issue of trans inclusion and acceptance, you don't compromise on. But how you define that, does trans inclusion and acceptance mean that we accept a individual's determination of their gender as dispositive when it comes to participating in sports? Maybe we don't have to do that. Maybe that's not how I would define. Maybe that's not how we need to define trans inclusion and acceptance. All right. Thanks so much to everybody for comments. Really appreciate it. That will do it for today's program. I love to see all the chat in the YouTube. That is what I want here. And again, look, hey, I appreciate hearing me out on issues, even when you disagree with me. I certainly will listen to you. If you have a countervailing view or you have the same view, call in. I want to hear from you. That's what we do at this show, 240-242-5646. That's what makes, I think, Halitics kind of different from all the others. If you like what I'm doing, please click like, please click subscribe. Thanks so much for being part of Halitics. I will be back tomorrow for the free-for-all.